No, actually, Ron, and thank you very much. It was a pleasant surprise, and it is obviously a great honour. But I actually had been on a couple of weeks' holiday in England at the back end of April, and I was going through the mail when I got home, and there's this letter from the Governor-General, and I thought, wonder why the Governor-General would be writing to me. So I've opened the letter, of course, and it's outlined the fact that you've been nominated and successfully going to become a member of the Order of Australia. And after that, you have to send the nomination form back with an acceptance, or you can refuse to accept the award. Obviously, I, of course, delighted to accept the award, and you have to confirm your details and one or two other things. And I had a very short deadline because I'd been away, and I didn't want to, dare I say it, rely on Australia Post, but so I faxed my return. Not many people would do that. No. So, and I thought, oh gee, I hope they get it, Anyway, they did, because then you get a second letter to say, thank you, we've received your acceptance and you will be included in the awards, and they'll be announced on the Queen's birthday holiday. In that second letter, you advised that there will be the presentation ceremony will be at Government House in Melbourne. So obviously, if you're a Victorian, you go to Government House in Melbourne. New South Welshman, you go to in Sydney, and so on. And the advice was it would probably be sometime in September. So I'll just wait for the next. And obviously, Victorian Government House will wait. And I said to my wife, she went and helped with the CWA at the Australia Day when the governor opens up Government House, and she went out in the back gate and helped with all the cooking and things. And I said, darling, I think the next time you go into Government House, you might be going in the front door, not the back door. Oh, that's brilliant. So she chuckled and said, maybe I will. So I'm not sure how many invitations I'll get, whether it's just one or whether the kids can come as well or not. I'm not quite sure, but that's. Well, I'll find out about that. I joined as a cadet. Interesting, because from the age of about 3 or 4, it was before I went to school, and you're talking to me on the block of land where I grew up, and I was at that age, right here, that I would walk around the house tossing a ball around and broadcasting games of cricket and football. Now, in those days, this is a long time ago now, that was the only sport that I knew, cricket and footy. Things have changed a bit since then. But my father, who'd grown up in the Depression and had been to the Second World War, suggested that I really needed to get a real job and not have these fanciful dreams, which was fair enough in those days, because I think it's wonderful now, that, digressing for a moment, that the opportunities for young people to get into the media and chase their dreams is so much greater. Anyway, so I actually, after school, studied and became trained as an accountant. Dare I say it, with all due respect to every accountant in Melbourne, how boring would my life have been if I became an accountant? So, while I was studying, life takes funny turns. I was conscripted. The Vietnam War was on, and Sir Robert Menzies had introduced a ballot for 20-year-olds the second half of 1965. And when Gough Whitlam became Prime Minister, it was the first thing he did. Stop the ballot, no more conscription. So I had my number pulled out by a man who I later became good friends with and worked with, Lindsay Hassett, a former Australian cricket captain and a wonderful man. So I still rubbished him for pulling my marble out, but that was the luck of the draw. You were able to finish your studies, and then once you finished your studies, then you had to advise the Department of the Army, I suppose it was, I can't remember now, to say, right, finish studies, and so then they get back and tell you, come in and have a medical, do that. So I had 2 years in the army, and again it was the luck of the draw that from what I could gather, that about 50% of those that were conscripted went to Vietnam, just over, maybe 50, 60%, and the rest didn't. I was one of those. That was again the luck of the draw, and I finished up spending most of my 2 years in Sydney. So I can say that there were 4 of us who shared a terraced house in Bondi Junction. We could walk to Bondi Beach. We could walk down to the Eastern Suburbs Leagues Club. And some of the local ladies thought we were at the time quite attractive, so we had a great time. But it was an eye-opening experience, and just before I was due for discharge from the army, one of my very good mates from school, who was one of the few people who knew that that's what I wanted to be, it was a sports commentator, rang me from Melbourne and said, had I seen Saturday's Age? Of course I hadn't. I used to get the Age on Friday and Monday for a preview and a review of the weekend sport, still following the footy and cricket in Melbourne, or as closely as I could. And he was a dissatisfied arts graduate who wasn't happy with his job, and he was going through the class, big wad of jobs in the Age, a bit different these days. And he'd seen the ABC advertising for a cadet in their sports department, and he said that was my job. So I said no, I hadn't seen it. So I said, you ring my father and get him to get one of his mates from golf who was either a judge or a surgeon, I was flying high, to write a lovely letter to say, Mr. Graham Dawson's a fine young man. Of course he was. And I said I would ring Frank. Yeah. Frank was Frank Tyson, the famous England fast bowler, F.H. Typhoon Tyson, who at the time was the main, ABC used to cover all the cricket on television. He was their main expert, but he'd also been my cricket coach at school, and in my last year at school I was captain of the team and Frank was the coach. And we had a very good, I would have said, mature student-master relationship. And so I rang him up and he said, do you really want the job? And I said, it's all I've ever wanted to do. And he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll get you in the front door. And that was what I wanted him to do. Yeah. He didn't have to do anything else, then it was up to me. So he got me in the front door and the rest is history. But after I'd been there about 3 months, I had enough courage to go up to the HR department, and I went up and I said, just as a matter of interest, Cameron I think was his name, could you tell me, because my great fear was that my application might have gone in the rubbish bin. Whether they did that would be enough, some go in, some so how many people applied for that job that I got? So he's gone to the old filing cabinet and pulled out the manila folder, beautiful stuff, and he said, just hang on a minute. Oh yes, 483. Yeah. So I thought, how many of those 483 went in the rubbish bin? So thank you, Frank, for at least getting me in the front door. And I said, that's fine. It's up to me. And fortunately it was up to me and I got the nod.
How cool's that? That's amazing.
How about that?
Oh, what a story.
I got the nod.
How cool's that? That's amazing.
How about that?
Oh, what a story. Oh. Also read, so as a young commentator, Alan Mcgilvray?
Alan Mcgilvray, yep.
Yeah. Told you to imagine you were talking to a blind man sitting at home. So, how did that help shape the way you called throughout your career, and was that a big moment for you in terms of developing?
Yeah, it was a great honour to work, because he was the doyen and probably is still regarded as one of the greatest commentators across all sports, but certainly as far as cricket's concerned. And as a young fellow, when I started, I was lucky enough to broadcast my first test after about 3 years, which was pretty good. And he did say, just think, this is particularly with radio. Television is a different style, but this is radio, which was his medium and basically has been mine, that you've got a blind person listening. You've got to tell them what is happening, where the ball is, its significance, or who's going to bowl, who's going to field, who's batting. And he also said, and I've continually told young commentators who've come to me for advice that the one thing that you cannot do in radio commentary is give the score too often, because nothing frustrates me more if I switch the radio on and after a couple of minutes I say, "What's the score? Tell me the score." Even if it's a footy game, you say, "The Hawks are leading the Magpies by 150 points." Only 150 or something, yeah, whatever. But at least you know what's happening. Yeah, and so that he reinforced that in my mind from a very early age, and that was fantastic advice.
Yeah, that's awesome.
One more point each and they'll be equal. And when the scores are like 8-8-56, brother, thank you, Harry Beitzel. Jack Cameron, the great scorer, from used to do the cricket for the ABC and then did the footy stats before the computers came in, and Champion Data just provided it all now. But Jack used to, well, his cricket scoring was immaculate, because he'd have, you know, Rowan's faced 43 balls and Smokey's faced 58. How many balls, you know, he'd have it straight there. You'd say balls faced, and he'd bang. And his information was, he never, I can't remember him ever speaking on air, which was amazing, because I did work with Bill Findle, who was a famous BBC cricket scorer, and Bill used to love it, getting onto the air. But so one day, might have been a Shield game, and say it was Stackpole and Redpath batting for Victoria, and he just said out of the corner of his mouth, or wrote it down, "One more run each and they'll be equal." And I've gone, what? Now, so they were both on 24. So, and I've fallen for it. And I said, one more run each and Stackpole and Redpath will be equal, and then I've realised what I've done. So I thought, no, I like that. So when the footy comes around, so for a long period of time I'd broadcast to 6PR in Perth, and they used to love it over there. But at one stage someone, I think I listened to one of a colleague, Brad Hardy's mates, said, "Tell Smokey he's only allowed one a game." So, but sometimes the scores are never the same. But when it happens, you've got to make the most of it. The first time up, 2-3-15, one more point each and they'll be equal. There are 2 or 3 real highlights. The first was being invited by the BBC to be part of the commentary team for the first Cricket World Cup, the final at Lords in 1975. Now, life takes funny turns, and my beautiful wife of many years standing is English, and we were there I was there for a brief holiday. She'd gone back. We'd been married a couple of years before in England. I did the right thing there, honourable gentleman, occasionally. So I'd arrived on the Monday. It was this time of the year, June long weekend. Same when the Queen's birthday. So I think I'd left, missed the footy on Monday. There'd been a State of Origin game on the Saturday at Waverley. Did I use that word? Waverley Park. Anyway, VFL Park. And we've gone to Royal Ascot on Tuesday, just in my father-in-law's car. We've driven up and parked his Cortina or whatever it was in this car park for 50p, which seemed like a lot of money in those days. And every other car was either a Mercedes, a Jag, or a Rolls. And the boys getting off the train, and I'm in my jeans and shirt and jumper and stuff, were saying, "Good on you, mate, yeah, you've got it." They couldn't believe it. So, there's a car park, we'll go and park there. We're allowed to do it. And we just had a great day. And the next day, Christopher Martin Jenkins, the late and great BBC commentator, and he'd been recently president of MCC, he'd been to Australia the previous summer for the England tour, and he'd just taken over as the BBC cricket correspondent from Brian Johnston, and we'd become friends, and he said, well, I said, we're coming to, I'll be in England. So the World Cup, he said, oh, look, he was going to the Oval for the semi-final between West Indies and New Zealand. He said, I'll get you into the committee room. You got a tie and jacket and something? I said, yeah, got a jacket. Always have a tie in the bag for occasions just like that. So into the committee room we've gone. Oh, beautiful day. Don't remember much about the cricket. But as expected, the West Indies won easily. We played England up at Headingley in the other semi-final. And Gary Gilmore, the late Gary Gilmore, left arm, beautiful, talented, probably should have done better. Took 6 for 14 and bowled England out for 94. And then we're 6 for 45 or something, and Dougie Walters, in his inimitable style, was slicing them over the slips and hooking them down there. And Gary Gilmore came in and he could smash them. And Dougie was 40 odd not out and Gary 20 odd not out, and we got the runs and won. So Australia in the final, unexpected, hard to believe, but it was. And so Christopher came in to see if we'd had a nice day after he'd finished work at the Oval, and said, I tell you what, you'll get a job on Saturday at the final. Australia's playing. I said, what? We were going, my father-in-law was a dairy farmer in Cornwall, so we were going to Cornwall on Friday. And he said, no, you'll get a job. I said, really? He said, yeah. Because Alan Mcgilvray, the gentleman we were talking about, was arriving in England on the Sunday morning. Australia was staying on to play 4 test matches in a shortened Ashes series. And such was, hard to believe that back then that one day cricket, this was something new and so, and they had about 20 guys from the West Indies who wanted to work, and they only wanted one, Tony Cozier, who only recently passed away, lovely man, good, great commentator. And there was Brian Johnston and John Arlott. And I said, and you? So, young fella, just on holidays, called up, and it was just a marvellous day. We've gone to Lord's. I managed to, it'll take too long to tell you the story, but I managed to get a ticket for the wife to get in, and the game started at 11. This is how different things are. They stopped for lunch. They had a change of innings. They stopped for tea, and no lights. But the game didn't finish until 20 to 9. Great light, of course, in the 20-something of June, and so Clive Lloyd played one of the great innings, and Viv Richards was just a new man in the West Indies team. I think he hit the stumps from square leg or point, one stump, bang, 3 times for run-outs. And they won by only 17 or 16 runs or something. So it was right to the end. And at the end, Dennis Lilly and Jeff Thompson, the famous bowlers, were batting and looking like they might pull off an unlikely victory. So the game in the day had everything. And I think we finished up getting back into London and having supper in town at about 11 o'clock. And I was still, on a high. But that was an absolutely amazing moment out of nowhere, and a real, just to be working with Brian and John Arlott, who I'd listened to as a young man on the old shortwave, years before, and Freddie Truman and Trevor Bailey were the experts. It was just a great day, and the best footy match, I'm a little bit biased because I've been a Hawthorn supporter since I was a young lad. Good judge, Rowan. And I must admit we've had a pretty good innings. Long may it continue. But the 1989 grand final, I just left the ABC and we'd set up the footy on 3AK, which was then owned by Channel 9. When I learnt Mr. Bond owned it, but Mr. Packer bought it back for about a quarter of the price he'd sold it to Mr. Bond for. Such was Mr. Packer's ability to do things like that. And we'd had a really good year. There was Harry Beitzel had left 3AW, Bobby Skilton and Robbie Flower. We were the main callers, and we had some interesting guys doing around the grounds, because every game basically was played on the Saturday Ricky Barham and Peter Welsh and Big Wow Jones. We had and Brian Wood. Great guys. Wonderful couple of years. And that game, Hawthorn and Geelong in 1989, I think probably the greatest game of football ever played. So brutal, high scoring, and I remember Tucky's wife was an Ablett, and someone asked her before the game, what do you think? Hawthorn to win, that's what I want, of course, and I don't mind if Gary wins the Norm Smith medal. Hawthorn won and Gary won the Norm Smith medal, and his performance as an individual that day was probably a greater game as anyone could possibly have played. Still couldn't get him over the line, and I still have a little chuckle with Malcolm Blight when I said, you sent a bloke out there to kill Dermot at the start of the game. He only half did the job, and then Dermot's dead and he's gone down to the forward pocket and he's able to take a... How inspiring was that? Anyway, it was just, had everything. And there was a moment at the Sydney Olympics, obviously, I think as good a sporting event that has ever been organised. The Centenary Test would have run at a pretty close second. That was brilliantly done. And the Sydney Olympics, and I've been on air, and I've been on air for about 15 or 20, just on my own, sitting in a little studio, making out, I don't know where, race, when the little man jumped out with the red disc and said to Jane Saville, sorry Jane, you're disqualified. You've lifted 3 times or whatever it was. And that was like, but I could see it coming, and I knew it had to happen because a couple of days before I'd broadcast the men's 20k, and the guy from Mexico had actually crossed the line first and was then subsequently disqualified. And the race was in the morning, but it was like finishing at about 11 o'clock midday or something. Yeah, it was a midday because the ABC actually delayed the midday news. So, and I outrated the midday news. No news, race. So it was just about midday it was going to finish. And I knew that and the stadium was full, 80,000 people. So if Jane gets in, crosses the line and gets disqualified, you can imagine what the 80,000 people would be like. So they had to stop her from getting into the stadium, and it was right at the gate. She was about to walk in, and this little fella, he must have been, jump out and stop her from going in and give her the red disc. So you could imagine how shattering that was. But she was just so gracious and handled it so well, and I was delighted. I mentioned Peter Walsh before, that I had some company in Manchester at the next Commonwealth Games, and Jane was going to win the gold medal, no disqualification this time, and I said to Walshy once last couple of hunters, I said, sorry Walshy, I'm pulling rank. I had to cry with her in Sydney, but I'm going to get her the gold medal in Manchester, so I called her across the line. So a small compensation, but I'll remember that, and I think it got replayed nearly every day on the ABC for the next 12 months.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
From a young age, a lot of my mates who obviously had professional careers, whatever they were doing, tradies, but they were getting involved with things like Apex, Rotary, Lions or whatever. And basically I used to tell people I knew I was going to have 2 days off a year, Christmas Day and Good Friday, but for most of my life I've worked every weekend and public holidays. Looks like the Good Friday might be going to change, please don't. Anyway, and I felt that I couldn't give a commitment to a service organisation because most of their fundraising or activities were on the weekend when the guys would be available. You could go out to dinner, to a meeting at night or whatever, but they get involved with things like that. So I wanted to make a contribution, but I wasn't quite sure how I could do it. And I mentioned Harry Beitzel before, and early in the 1989 season, he introduced me to a guy called Peter Cullen. We're outside the MCG, And Peter then was involved with Father Bob Maguire at the Sacred Heart Mission, which was the start of RecLink. And basically from that moment, Harry was living in Sydney. Harry had helped Peter with a lot of things, and Harry just basically said, Smoke, I'm hand passing to you. So I thought, well, that's something that I can help. So, you know, I don't think I've ever met anyone who's like Peter Cullen, because so many people out there from disadvantaged situations he's helped, homeless, and they've had addiction problems with all sorts of things. He's just the most amazing man. And so if I have been able to help him, I was on the phone to him because I sensed that he might have had something, and I said, now I'm still going down to his grand finals and doing the broadcast for him, and then comparing his best and fairest. And you ought to see the guys and girls who get club best and fairest or some sort of trophy from the football, and then what he's done with that football league to give these poor people who've got such issues a focus to be involved are just sensational. And it's something that, as long as I can, I will continue to be involved. So that's gone on for 25 years or something now, and it's just still continues. About the same time, I got a phone call from a guy called Stephen Jolly, who was heavily involved. Blind man, cannot see, would not see more than an inch or so in front of his face, with the radio for the print handicap. And he said, been listening to you for years. I said, oh, that's good. And you're not bad. I said, oh, thank you very much. The blind person again, harshest critics of all times, because they are so reliant on you when it comes to listening to the radio, and their ability. The other thing is, one of my good mates had a blind man as a receptionist at his work. I rang him up one day, and this guy answered the phone. You're Smokey Dawson, aren't you? He recognised my voice. I said, yes, I am. Well, are you ringing here for sort of thing? And I said, I'll talk to my mate. Who's your mate? I said, we did Nasho together. He's my mate. Right. Oh, okay. So we still knock around. So Stephen said, we broadcast Wimbledon. The second week, our audience, the ABC were broadcasting the finals on radio Saturday and Sunday night. Can you come in? 11 o'clock. When Channel 9 started they used to get a nice clean feed from Channel 9 where they kept the pictures up and didn't put the ads on, but we had to work out, because we had the sound, so that when the rally was in progress, you know, Rana backhand down the line, Smokey a forehand across court, la-da-da-da-da, and then as soon as a point was won, you shut up, and then Nuke or Fred Stolley or someone would say, well, he's played that backhand, they'd shut up and we'd pick it up again. So that went on for probably 15 or so years until they were able to get a feed from the BBC. I don't know how they did it, but sometimes, I'd be there till 4 or 5 in the morning. And I remember he rang up one day, said, Pat Rafter's playing in the final of the US Open, and we want to broadcast it. Channel 9 are going to give us the picture again. You got to come in 5 o'clock in the morning or something. Yeah, okay, mate. Yeah, I'll be there. So, and then that being involved in the tennis led to helping them with other things. So, that was a wonderful involvement. And then I just happened to meet a bloke who used to organise the Pied Pipers fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. He said, come on, you're the compere, get down here, bang, bang, bang. So they'd have 1,000 people at the wherever, and you'd get up and interview a couple of sporting legends and keep the night going and things like that. So that went on for a number of years. So that, by doing that, I just felt I could make up for not being involved in a service organisation, and now I can say I am, because that's a Paul Harris Fellow, which is a Rotary Club's award, and they gave me that before I became a Rotarian. So I thought, well, there's a way to recruit a bloke. So I'm in Rotary now and trying to help a bit, as well as still keeping my involvement with, now that I call myself a semi-retired gentleman, Rowan, still doing a bit, but and perhaps after Monday, I can use the word gentleman. It's certainly something I really, really enjoyed. Ken Davis, in those days, I think the board liked to have someone from within the media structure on the board, maybe to help them with anything that came up in that area. And for whatever reason, Ken Davis, who was a print man more than anything, great cricket writer particularly for the Herald Sun, covered several tours of England, he perhaps suggested me, so off I went. Again, make a contribution, but obviously sport was a winner with me, just the love of it, and what I thought was what Vicsport was trying to do, and encompassing and the physical activity and encouraging everyone at all levels to be involved in the right way and to help organisations that were doing all of this sort of thing. So it was a no-brainer for me. Wonderful. I mean, Anne-Marie was my first CEO, and she moved over and established the Institute of Sport in Scotland, and I bumped into her. She came back for the Sydney Olympics. I bumped into her again, match, and then she's come home to run the Victorian Institute of Sport. Julie was fantastic, Kate was fantastic, and obviously Mark is brilliant. So I must have known something that he was going to come on the scene, because I retired before he did. No, Mark, only joking. So no, and it seems to me that the organisation just going on, the wonderful people from all. That was a great thing, that there was a nice cross section of male and female people from various backgrounds, but they had the common goal of saying, right, the best, what physical activity, well organised sport is just a no-brainer and a win-win-win for the community. And I mean, keeping politics aside, I don't think we ever talked about it. And the late and great Frank Wilkes, who was my first chairman, he'd have no idea who I voted for. And that was fantastic, that we could go into a board meeting and that sort of thing would never come up. But in dealing with the state government, we all used to say, right, we've got to knock on the door of whoever was the current minister of the day. So, then it was Tom Reynolds, and then the government changed, so we have got to knock on the door of the next fella. And so that was something that we did as a unifying body, which was very important. And again, who we all voted for was totally irrelevant. So a wonderful part of my life, Rowan, and to be still involved in the little way I can, which is a bit like the RecLink involvement and things like that. When I go down to the awards night each year and just do a little bit, but to catch up with some past board members and some current board members and the sporting champions and those that are recognised, the officials and the administrators, which is fantastic, because I just hope that it never happens. The volunteers are so crucial, and the administrators, for one who still runs around in the morning at 8:30 on a Saturday umpiring the kids' footy. You can't have games without people who do all the hard work behind the scenes, or blow the whistle, or write in the scorebook, or raise a finger. So no, wonderful part of my life, and cherish it forever, and hope I can be involved there too for a long time.